Hello and welcome to the Town End podcast. It's episode 33 and it's a 5-star performance from Dundalk tonight in Oriel Park. 5-1 victory over St.Mochtas in the second round of the FAI Cup. Joining me tonight to start, anyway, we'll slowly build to a full team here, is Donal and Pingu. Gentlemen, how are we?
Good.
Sorry, my connection is gone. No, so all good, lads. Look, it's a different podcast than we were planning to have at half time tonight, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that had us all worried for a moment there that we were being built up as the potential banana skin in this round, and I thought we were going to then slip on it. So to get away with that, I'm quite happy. I suppose, Donal, you were there yourself tonight.
Of course.
Atmosphere and everything else. Yeah, well, sure, look, your name gets picked out each week somehow.
Yeah, I lived there.
Stewart's inquiry. Atmosphere and everything seemed quite good tonight. What was it like actually in the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like there was a good first 15 minutes. Like they scored, they were playing well, and I think there was a little bit of tension came in after the goal, and then everybody was obviously having memories of last week and the 3D game, and I think people were getting a little bit angsty about too many passes from side to side, from centre back to centre back, and we weren't really getting anywhere. But once they got into the second half and got in front, then everybody relaxed, and the team looked like they relaxed, and it felt like a night off. Like I was saying after you beforehand, it's like you don't feel stressed after this. You don't feel disgusted after this like we did the last few. So yeah, it was a decent night. We take them when we can get them.
Yeah, Pingu, myself and yourself watching from afar, I suppose it. First half we were slightly worried. Were you smiling at already?
Just happy to be here, Chris.
Yeah. Look, I suppose to get our noses in front tonight as well, and Sammy had a decent game, but you know, I wouldn't have thought one of his strengths would have been a header, but look, it was a decent header from a corner.
Yeah, I thought he played very well. Compared to last week, obviously he got a lot of flack at the. Am I gone again?
No, you're there, but
you're good.
All right. Good for now. Phew. I thought it was a much improved performance from Sammy tonight. I thought he played well. It was a good finish for the goal. As I say, look, full credit to St.Mochtas. I thought they gave us a really good game in the first half, and then the second half was a very professional performance from the Dundalk. So overall, I think, like they mentioned it in the stream on commentary tonight, it doesn't change any of the questions that we had last week. But it does look at, as Donal said, it's a night off. We're not going to worry about everything after a result like that. We're into the next round of the cup, so hopefully that'll bode well for at least a decent cup run.
Yeah. After only just getting our noses in front, Donal, they showed signs from time to time as well. To St.Mochtas tonight that they could potentially get in behind us, or at least put us under a bit of pressure. And unfortunately, it's one that Sam Stanton won't want to see again. But if you want an opportunity like that to fall to everybody, it's definitely not Garrett McCaffrey anyway, with the form he's in.
Yeah, and it was just one of those where like you could kind of see it coming. Like they knew when to press. Like once we started playing around at the back, like they were like, right, we're going to push up here, and we got caught. I feel bad for Stanton because that's twice that's happened to him now, where he's given the ball away and like giving the goal away as well because he's giving the ball away. And he'd be one of the ones where like most people would just be. He'd be like almost the first one of any of the new recruits that you'd be like, right, keep him next season. Yeah. And you feel bad when it's him that these things happen to. Like he was kind of played into a hole, but it's still on him, I guess, that he lost the ball. But they had us. They had a counter-attacking plan. Like they definitely saw Drogheda last week and thought, look, there was a couple of times I think tonight where Andy Boyle would come forward with the ball, and their striker would just move in, or somebody would just move into the space that he was after leaving behind, just ready for a ball to be pinged over the top. And it was a good system, like, and it was working because we were under a bit of pressure, obviously, in the first half. And but then once they got the second goal, it was a different game then. But they had a plan, like, and they did, and every single one of them ran themselves into the ground. So, you know, for all credit to them. But I guess the fitness levels and all that kind of stuff just kind of
I think so. I think the combination of a few things, all right, and maybe a step up in class. You know, just to look at the first half as well, Pingu, you know, we made a couple of changes in the starting lineup and gave Yates his first starts, and Wilfred Sahibo come in, but unfortunately his game didn't last too long tonight.
No, but I actually felt that it's the first time this season I'll say I felt a little bit sorry for him. He actually looked gutted when he got injured. You know, I think he seen tonight, at least at that point when he got injured, it looked like he seen tonight as an opportunity to stake a claim for a position in the team to kind of right a few wrongs, because he has been, he has been poor and he's been called out for his poor performances. So I think, again, he probably didn't do a whole lot, but he didn't do anything really wrong, I don't think, for the time that he did play. But that's another injury that we're going to have to worry about potentially, and he was going to be gone on international duty, I think, as well. So he came in and got a start after a good cameo appearance last week. Thought, you know, I know we'll talk about the second half in a little bit. He was quiet in the first half. I thought he came into it a little bit better in the second half. But Yates didn't have a lot to do, but done okay. You know, the goal, obviously, it was a great finish by McCaffrey, wasn't it? You know, so you can't really blame him too much for that. But I think as far as the first start goes, I think he done all right. He imposed himself on the game whenever needed, albeit he didn't have a lot to do.
Yeah, which is I suppose is kind of what you want as well from a standing keeper, to have an opportunity in a game like that, and to bring in one or two people who needed minutes. I suppose you were probably looking at Dan Cleary on the bench, wondering, you know, it might have just depended on what way the game went today, or other injuries might have got a couple of minutes in. But you could see he definitely didn't want to use Michael Duffy or anything like that today, and the fact he didn't have to, I think that's great. So staying back for an extra 10 laps at the end of the game around the pitch. Gally, welcome. We only started 10 minutes ago, but you know, hey,
first time for everybody.
Yeah, when you're shaking the buckets all day, this is what happens.
My hands are shocked.
Twice I got caught at traffic lights, and I was like, God, I can't not do it. Like, I've no coins left in the car, like nothing at this stage.
We'll have a card machine next year. We sum up card. We'll have that.
We did. Yeah. That's not too bad. Gally, we were only just talking about the game there, and we're just about to, I suppose, kind of go into the second half now. It's a 10-minute hat trick for Pat Hooban, and it really puts everything to bed. I'm going to come to Pingu in a second about this, because I know you'll.
I'm just going to say it's Pingu's sick.
Yeah. No, we were talking about Sammy having a good game, and you know, when he goes and wins the penalty as well, he looked quite lively tonight, didn't he?
Yeah, and I was actually, I didn't see it. I'd actually listened to John Murphy and Gussie on the Dundalk FM, listened to it, and they seem to be singing his praises, but then he mightn't get mentioned. You know, I don't know if that's just a commentary. He might. I don't know if he had a lot of the ball. I didn't actually see the game, but he seemed to not get mentioned in spaces. I know, like, when I jumped onto it, they seemed to be talking about Han a lot, and maybe up until the goal, they weren't having him at all. They were thinking he was going to be ripped off at half time. But yeah, look, Stanton's a solid player. I know he's had some mistakes, but players like that, you know, like, you kind of need him to cover for the likes of Sahibo when he's now playing. When I know he's got off injured or whatever, but
yeah, he went off
injured. Those type of players. I'm surprised he started, to be honest. I thought I know, no disrespect to Mochtas or anything, I thought Ryan O'Kane would have started the game, and that's not to say he would have took over from Stanton, but really surprised he didn't start the match. That was kind of the biggest surprise for me. But like, even things like, you know, I don't know if is Cherry injured. I don't know why he hasn't come in. I don't know why, like, he's sitting around all season. I don't know why he hasn't started. I know Yates has come in, but I thought it would have been a game for him tonight as well. But yeah, look, it's 5-1. I know it's Mochtas, but for the first couple of minutes, it looked like a real banana skin. Like, even people at the doing the bucket collection today for the bells, people were really worried about the game. You know, it seemed to be just, if they got on the wrong end of it, it was just going to be an absolute mare of a couple of days leading up to these famous group of fixtures we have coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, look at 5-1. I mean, Hooban hat-trick as well, and Pingu loves him. He's got to be back in the good books now, isn't he?
You think so? So we'll come to Pingu. Just so he steps up for another penalty. How confident were you?
I wasn't, to be completely honest, because his rate this season with penalties hasn't been great. But look, I put it in the group chat beforehand in the first half. I don't know how many times, or I don't know if he touched the ball. And then Donald was very quick to remind me after he scored his first goal and his second goal. I reminded myself when he got the hat trick. But I mean, the frustrating thing with Pat is at times this season he's looked disinterested when he's out on the pitch, and we all know that he's got this quality. And when you compare him to someone like Dave McMillan, who just works his socks off and maybe doesn't get the breaks that Pat has, if Pat put in a bit more effort along the lines of what McMillan puts in, I feel like he imposes himself on the game. Now, when you look on the pitch, we've got Andy Boyle and Pat Hooban should be your two leaders, on both sides of the pitch. And then you've got Andy Boyle bursting his bollocks, apparently still isn't training full time with the team because he's carrying the knock. And then you have Hooban, who, because he didn't get a ball into feet, he's slapping his ties and he's standing around and he's walking. You know what I mean? And it just, to be fair, I was delighted when he did get the hat trick. True gritted teeth, I was very happy to see it. But it's like, but you want to see that more often from him. Where is that Hooban? I just feel like the chips have been down this season. The chips have been down towards the end of last season, and I think we just need to see a little bit more of what we've seen in that second half. It's for a player of that quality, without being disrespectful towards St.Mochtas, it should be easy for him in a game like that to score a hat trick, which he did. Now we want to see him do that on Friday against Waterford. So look, it's great that he's hitting form before we go into that, but I really. Hopefully that continues into the next group of fixtures.
Yeah. And Donald, in particular, his second and third goal looked particularly sweet tonight. Very confident, to pull the ball back and place it in the far corner. You were there yourself. Was it equally as impressive in the flesh?
Yeah, I think the
at the game again, Donald.
Of course, like I am a fixture of Oriel Park. The two goals are very good. Pat Hooban's the best in the world. I just wanted to show it. Anyway, he's I felt bad for him. I did think in the first half, and it's thought the same against Drogheda last week. They didn't make the most of him. There's opportunities to fire balls into him, and they turned him down. He might not control all of them, but he's moving around between the two centre backs, and fair enough, he probably doesn't get involved as much as say McMillan does. But at the same time, you have to play to his strengths. You have to get the ball into him and get runners running off. And it happened in the second half, that got the ball into his feet, and Sean Murray made a run off the back of him, and the whole thing just seemed to flow a little bit. But it can be very frustrating to see him not get the ball, because when he doesn't get the ball, he gets very frustrated and he gets very animated at being frustrated. So I get it can be tough to watch him, but I did think they need to make more use of him when he is up there, and just play to his strengths. Yeah.
I think Flano just rolling in there, just saying that obviously he's a different player to McMillan. And obviously that plays into, and I think we've mentioned a few times, it can depend on the opposition we're playing with as well, that whether you go for a real pacey striker like McMillan who will get in behind you, or do you need to get somebody like Hooban who plays more with his back to goal and wants to link in and bring other people in, but then you lose that bit of pace around your team. Gally, for Han to pick up another goal at the end, He showed a lot of energy when he came on in the Laird Derby the previous week. Maybe without the end, product out of it, but it was good for him just to get another goal.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's even important for him to get minutes at this stage and mind the goal. Like, I remember talking about it earlier in the season, and I kind of thought we had a bit of a baller on our hands. He just seemed, like you said, energetic, quick. He seemed to move very fast, with or without the ball. He seemed to outstrip a lot of players with the ball at his feet as well. He kind of reminded me, now, I'm going back here a long time when I made this quote, but he kind of reminded me of Keith Ward when he moved with the ball. Now, I'm really clutching at straws now calling this and saying it again in August. But that was very early days. But
size-wise, he's probably the same as Ward.
Size-wise, yeah. A bit more hair. But I think he could be actually a very good footballer. For some reason, it just hasn't worked for him. Look, we're saying this with a lot of players. Ryan O'Kane had a good start of the season, and maybe in training they're just not. Leahy was another one. Maybe in training they're just not producing. I don't know, but yeah, look, delighted for him. John Murphy was giving him awful on the Dundalk FM. Like, I was surprised he was still on the pitch at 73 minutes to score the goal, because he was sure he was coming off at half time. But yeah, look, delighted, especially look at it. It takes. I know he's here a while, but players coming in from so far away, and there's a lot of them like that. But him in particular. They adjusted the lifestyle and things like that, and yeah, look, delighted for players like that to get on the ball. Players who they seem to give it a lot. Again, we don't know what the training's like, but yeah, look, a few more games. I think he could be very handy. Like, he just doesn't seem to grasp it when he does come on. I think he could be utilised maybe more up front, like, for pace, like a Dan Kelly, that type of thing. I just don't think he has it in him, along the line crossing in. I think the lads were saying on the radio, he can't cross the street, never mind the ball. But look, I do think there's a good footballer in there, very energetic. But yeah, delighted to see him score. Like, look, just delighted to get the result over the line. Like, I know it's Leinster Senior League, but it's really only 2 divisions. That's all you're talking, really. It's not like it's not public for football.
Yeah, just before we bring in our guest tonight, I suppose, Pingu, just to wrap it up, once we got that far ahead in the game, it was good to see Vinny kind of utilise the bench and given the likes of Hanratty and O'Kane, getting these lads in, get some minutes. Let's have a look at them. Like I said, you're looking at the bench, you're thinking Cleary, Duffy. You didn't want to be using them tonight if you could get away with it. So I think it was good just to get some minutes and have a look at a few other players.
Yeah, and I thought all 3 young lads that came in done very, very well.
Oh yeah, Moeo as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they imposed themselves on the game, and I mean, both Hanratty and O'Kane could have got a goal there in the last few minutes of the game. It was great to see. Just a game like that, like, once you go up a few goals, you have to give these boys a chance. Like, we've been crying out because of how Ryan O'Kane played in pre-season for him to get chances. Like, this is probably what only is competitive, 3rd or 4th game all season. So in games like this here, throw him in, give him that chance. And I think this is probably, in any game that he's come on in a competitive fixture, this is probably the best that he kind of performed, in terms of imposing himself on the game. So yeah, it was, look, as I say, any chance to give some of these young lads that potentially, the way things are going, they could be in the first team next year. So we might as well start blooding them in now.
Yeah, one of the few people they would actually contracts, of course, for next year. So yeah, we could definitely do with this. Look, I suppose we'll bring in our guest tonight. This gentleman, I suppose, is no stranger to most League of Ireland people. Anyone that's got any idea of it, if you're watching reading any of it, should I say, of his match reports with the Irish Independent, LOI Central co-host, contributor on many programmes, not at least the Off the Ball. Very welcome to the Town End podcast to DanMcDonnell. How are you, Dan?
Hi lads, how are things? Good to be with you.
I'd say at half-time, Dan, you're probably going, oh my God, why did I choose to come on this podcast on this night?
Oh God. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking this is a sort of a nice soft night where, like, not, what's the worst that could happen tonight? And sort of half-time I was thinking, oh no, there's going to be sort of Arsenal fan TV stuff going on here. It's sort of 11 o'clock and, blood sacrifices and stuff. So, yeah.
That's pretty much the way the comments end up going usually anyway, Dan. So.
Yeah, well, it's just as well that I think the banana skin was avoided, I guess, and there's not really much more you can say about it. I didn't watch. I was sort of didn't see all of the game, but saw most of it, and you would have thought in second half, considering we had a couple of the Mochtas lads on our podcast during the week, and Mick Daly was in Lanzarote until Tuesday or Wednesday, and some of the Dundalk lads are taking home a substantial amount of money, shall we say. So it would have been, I think, up there with the crises of all crises if that didn't happen. I did hear a reference to the Portmarnock defeat in 2001, where I can say I was one of the 50 people that was there behind the fence during the foot and mouth days. So
you and Jerry Malone then, was it?
And I wasn't too far away from Jerry. I didn't get to see some of Jerry's live stream earlier on. I was actually out just at the start of the game. I saw there was the camera appeared to be pointed at his shoe while he was commenting, so I didn't decide to dial in and continue with that one. But Jerry was probably inside.
About the Dublin media straight after, but
but Jerry was probably. I'm just thinking in 2001. So I don't know. I assume the media were allowed in at the time, so Jerry was probably in there. Asking whoever the manager was at the time, was it Martin Murray maybe, if they were going to resign afterwards, which was Jerry's thing after every match around that era, as far as I recall. But anyway.
But look, like you say, a potential banana skin seemed to be avoided, and a much needed boost in confidence, especially when you think of like a hat trick for Hooban tonight. That's coming off the back of the Louth derby. You wouldn't have thought that, would you?
No, I think that's probably. I think the Hooban thing is probably the main thing I would have thought from a Dundalk perspective to take out of it. I'm not sure there's much else he can take out of the game realistically. But I think that's something. And I think you mentioned, I think just as I come in, like one or two of the young lads coming on at the end, probably two. I think that would be a positive
young
as
lads
well.
Came on there tonight.
I think beyond that, it's hard to read a huge amount into it. In fact, the first half, in some ways, you could say it's a bit more worrying because you're giving some of the players who haven't played maybe a chance to seize the moment, and they didn't necessarily do that. I mean, they did eventually, but as I said, Mochtas are basically coming out of pre-season, so really, if you can't overrun them in the second half of a game at this time of the year, that's grim. So there's not a huge amount more you can say on top of it than that, but I suppose avoiding injuries, with the exception, of course, of the Zahiba one, which is a mad one, really, because you can't. You're trying not to be. I think sometimes you don't mean to be unkind, but obviously there's just been such an absolute mad signing, more than any signing probably in possibly the history of the league. In terms of sort of the spend relative to relative to output, and I feel bad because it's someone in the country coming here and. I thought that the stick in the game in Tala, the European game, was pretty sad to see. But yet at the same time, you have to also look at it and go, well, there's a lot of money being paid here. I mean, if he'd sustained that injury on international duty next week, it probably would have saved the club around 20 or 30 grand. Because if you get injured in international duty, the FIFA has to pay your wages over the next couple of weeks. So it's that one is up there with the sort of the strangest one, but there is a person behind it and all too, and I do appreciate that, and it's unfortunate for him, but I mean I think even Sloggett coming in probably that probably helped at that stage, I would have thought. But anyway, what do we discuss now?
Yeah, that kind of segues us in nearly, Dan. When we look at, I suppose, the circus and everything we have to call it at Oriel Park this year from afar, and I suppose we're invested in as being supporters here. You're if you take your journalist hat and you're looking at us, I mean, we were the club that just keep on giving for the past 2 years. Am I right?
Yeah, no, and it's a sort of a real mad one, this, because I think sometimes we all sort of use a bit of gallows humor to get through the day and to get through the months. And I think at times, as I said, there's been a slapstick nature to what's been happening with Dundalk. And it's the gift that keeps on giving, as you say, to some degree. And I've said this, I think, to people before. I mean, I work for a national newspaper. League of Ireland coverage in a national newspaper isn't always the most straightforward sell. And sometimes it's either like really, the stuff that really gets a good showing is really good news or really bad news. And like the Dundalk have delivered across the last 8 years, or 8 years basically, a bit of both. And sometimes people would have said to me and would come at me when you're reporting some of the stuff that's been going on, going, well, why aren't you putting the same attention on someone else? Like take any other club, take your pick of, why aren't you doing this about Pats, say, when it's the pro-license shenanigans that's going on with say Filippo and Shane Keegan. But I mean, you can destroy that point really if you break it down over a couple of reasons, because no one's ever really tried to claim that Stephen O'Donnell isn't the manager of Pats. But anyway, leave that to one side. Like, the reason that there's so much scrutiny on the Dundalk is, of course, they've won 5 leagues in the space of 7 seasons. They've qualified for Europa League group stage football twice, and in 2016 in particular, for me, probably elevated League of Ireland football in a way that, almost 15 years working for the Independent now, I've never experienced anything like it. 2016, by far my favourite year in the job by an absolute mile, because you're actually watching an Irish club compete on a real even, well, no, not on an even footing financially, but in terms of actually how they carry themselves and sort of portray themselves. And to watch a club that has managed to do that, and to be fair, a core of players that was there throughout managed to do that. And for that club, who like the name Dundalk was like synonymous with like a new standard, setting a standard, being a standard setter, and to see that club over the last 18 months become an absolute and utter laughingstock, and like a circus, and even what's even out there now, I don't think is even a fraction of the truth of the extent of the circus. And like, that is a massive story. Like, it's the rise and the fall. And it's because this bar was set so high that the dropping of the bar was so dramatic and traumatic. And at times you make jokes and you refer to the sort of madness, and it's a bit offhand. But like, behind it all, I find it really deeply frustrating and a really, really sad story, because I then, a lot of the same people who would have said to me in 2016, well, this is great, this is a club that's setting standards for the League of Ireland, are now saying in 2021 it's the same old League of Ireland. Look what happened to Dundalk, and that's it. But that's a long-winded answer, but that's the truth of it.
I don't think there's a straightforward answer to it, though.
No,
either. And it's exactly like you say. We only talked about it last week. Of in the midst of those heights, Dan, everyone was kind of wondering, how are Dundalk doing this? How is Dundalk's fitness so much better? And suddenly every club was investing in strength and conditioning. Why? Because Dundalk were doing it. And we were scoring these last minute goals, and we were kind of revolutionizing the league to give it one way. It seems like we're doing the complete opposite of that, where we're letting some of our best players go to our rivals. We haven't invested in the quality at times, I don't think. And it's like you said, it's a shell of a club compared to where it used to be. And I know COVID doesn't help a lot when you think about the fans trying to keep that, I suppose, connection to the club. But with COVID, it's just a perfect storm. If you need to have your house in order, have the fans roll in behind you, and that just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll maybe come back to the fans thing. I think, because I think that is relevant. I do actually believe that the extent to which things have plummeted wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't have happened, I don't believe, without COVID, if you know what I mean. If there was full stadiums and no restrictions, I almost think that things got into a bit of a vacuum, and it almost, things became tolerated because there was a drift. But maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. The previous point about the strength and conditioning stuff, like, it is very true. But I think it's an important point to make here too, that say 2018 or 2016, like, were the high watermarks maybe of recent times. Like, the club itself wasn't perfect. Like, it was a great group of players. And I think that's an important point in the context of the ownership, which I'm sure we'll end up discussing. Like probably when the new ownership came in, I think there was almost an acknowledgement that something needed to change to bring things to the level that they're at. Like Stephen Kenny was very frustrated at times. Like Stephen Kenny, it wouldn't have been 1,000,000 to 1 that he would have walked away at 1 or 2 times. Which I'm not sure if people are completely aware of that, because I think maybe like he became a bit frustrated, obviously, by the ground and where is the development going here? And it's probably one of the there's a lot of sliding doors moments in this whole thing, and I think the club did need someone. I wouldn't say like Peak Six, but of that sort of ilk. They needed something from outside to maybe come in. And a lot of volunteers that were running the place there, who now have been lost, and the club is struggling without them. But they probably needed to professionalise that side of the operation a small bit more to find some kind of plan and direction there, because the whole thing was built on an exceptional group of players. And if those players left, then you were in bother. But there was a sort of a culture underpinning it as well, and there was a continuity with those players that managed to sort of spill through for a bit. But like a lot of things were lost over in a short space of time. Like Stephen Kenny, I think probably in his last year at Dundalk was probably close to as happy as he might have been there, because all of a sudden Peak Six were coming in, and because Kenny was the messiah, he couldn't really be sort of told what to do that much. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't malleable in the way that they might have perceived other people to be. And it just so happened the job of his life obviously came up, and he had to go. It would have been interesting to see how things would have panned out if Kenny had stayed around and that thing hadn't come up with the original Peak Six ownership thing, which didn't involve the owner's dad, but did involve the staff that they'd sort of designated to doing stuff on the ground. Some of whom were bad appointments, it has to be said. But some of them had their heart in the right place. I mean, people like Mike Tracy, for example, who, as far as I know, is now helping out again in a voluntary capacity, probably because that's what it is. It's not some sort of, I think people suggesting it's some kind of like being brought back in by.
I believe it's more like an advisory role.
Yeah, but it's. I think. Michael can speak for himself, and actually, to be fair, like I haven't really been in contact with Mike about this, but my understanding from talking to other people, I think Mike was the face of the thing for a lot of people. He came over and met people and looked at them in the eye and talked to them and social and said stuff that's on the record that is permanent, that can't be erased from the record. And this is my opinion, this is my reading of it. I would suggest possibly feels a degree of discomfort about how things have gone, and clearly with good intentions probably wants to try and help that situation out, which I think there's something noble about that, because I don't think he would have even foreseen what was coming.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we'll touch a little on the ownership side then, Dan, if that's all right. I mean, it's like you say, we had peaks and troughs. So there was good appointments and not so good appointments when we came from this stability, I suppose. Well, we came from rock bottom. Let's not kid ourselves first and foremost. And then Paul and Andy came in, put an investment into the club and got us to unbelievable heights. And we kind of wondered, where do we go from here? Like you just mentioned, and then we got this outside influence. And when you looked at Pete Six, their CV, you're thinking these guys are exactly what we need to go to the next level, because they have the experience and they seem to have the know-how. They had the connection with Bournemouth and everything at the time, and we're thinking, great, we can link up a bit of synergy between the two clubs possibly, because we'd seen, I'm thinking back when Fozzie was here and we had the links with Reading at the time, and Carl McHugh, Michael Hector came over, and we were all kind of thinking, wow, can we tap into that again, because that worked out incredibly well for us at the time. You think about even the career that the two guys have had since. I think one of the main problems with that, and it's I'm looking at the background behind us all here in this as well, is Oriel Park is the biggest gripe with with every League of Ireland fan, let alone the Dundalk fans too, how we can have so much success and have nothing built upon that. Like, you're thinking European group stage money twice, and yet all we've had is a lick of paint in Oriel Park. It's an awful shame.
No, it is. No, and there is layers to that, to the ground thing, because I mean, it is true when people say there's very few clubs in the country that have spent their own money on their own stadium. That's basically a fact. I think Sligo Rovers are probably one of the few that can really sort of hold their head up on that. I mean, they had a period of success around the sort of early 2010s or whatever, and they did around that time probably put some investment into their ground, and they actually fell off the pace then a bit over the next period of time. But other clubs, I mean, it's well documented. They've availed of sort of council support to get where they are. Now, that obviously would have involved some clever lobbying at times too. And I mean, there is no doubt. I think when people sometimes vent at, say, Louth County Council and politicians in the Dundalk area, I think it's completely valid to do that.
We normally do, Dan.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, that's good. I mean, how many times in one's life do you need to see Peter Fitzpatrick canvassing outside Oriel Park? I mean, surely there has to be a quota where you have to stop. Once it happens 2 or 3 times, you never have to go through that in your life again. And then you sort of see him on the Oireachtas committee back in 2016, 2017. Where they're meant to be interrogating John Delaney, and they are, of course, praising him for his his wonderful contribution to Irish football. And you realise there's no doubt that Dundalk hasn't been very well served by the local political classes. And I noticed there was the announcement, the sort of announcement about the grand thing lately, which is a bit vague, really, to be honest. But at least there is some political involvement in it, and maybe people's conscience has been stirred a bit by what's going on. Now, there probably would have been a view, of course, and it's a very Irish thing. Well, they're making loads of money. They're making loads of money from football on the pitch, so that they can spend it on their stadium. But of course, the broader point is that there's a community benefit to having a successful football club, and they do bring stuff to the local community through tourists and all of that. If you have a good team, everyone knows that, to be obvious. But I guess what I'm saying is, I understand when new owners come in. I actually, one of the things I remember saying about that, I was up at that launch in the YDC that a lot of people remember, the Peak 6 launch. And I was actually quite happy that they didn't come in with some sort of shiny stadium plan, like one of these sort of sketches. Yeah, like a little model train set stadium that everyone pulls out from time to time. But this is their vision, and I think Irish football is littered. There must be a warehouse somewhere where all these Irish stadiums, like Aircom Park and all these.
These are all Aircom Park,
they're all. Well, that's the Vitesse Stadium, of course, isn't it? But exactly. They're all in it. They're all kept in a shed somewhere. But
they're being minded by top people.
I sort of liked that. I sort of didn't mind the honesty that they came in and they said, well, the plan is to win the league every year, and they were attracted by winning the league every year, and then you get the group stage football. And there was a certain honesty. I mean, I think from the start, well, then you know who you've got into bed with here, so to speak. But obviously there was I think the problem maybe subsequently is that you thought that maybe some of the people they would have brought in might have had the acumen, and I'm talking about CEOs and people here, to maybe play the game with the local council and see what could be done. And the layout of Oriel is a disaster. I know from people that they have explored at various times looking at different things, but there's just so much wrong with the place in terms of even the pitch of the main stand, issues with the obstructed view, even how you would, it's bloody complicated and it's really hard going. And the Greenfield side idea, something I'd probably be opposed to, because I think there's a mistake in taking the club out of the town, but in some ways it's the only solution to the ground problem as well too, and there's a bit of a problem there. But really, Peak weren't there to do that, and I can sort of understand when they say, for all the garbage that you would hear from them about certain things, that's probably one where I'm thinking, you probably should have put some money aside towards it, but you needed some buy-in from politically around you. I don't think there's ever been any real evidence or sign of that, and that's maybe more of a loud thing, I think, than a peak thing in that case, I think.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that it took us so long to get the civic ceremony at the square that time, when you think of all the success that the club had, and even then the local council was very reluctant to do it till eventually. I just think there was the FAI Cup win then after, and it all just tied in nicely that there happened to be a stage up at the square at the time, and it was like, okay, this is perfect, we'll have to bow into it. But like you said, I think from our owners, I think you would have just like to have lobbied them slightly and say, look, we will put X amount forward, but you need to do all of this. You need to, put forward X amount. We were laughing and joking a little about Peter Fitzpatrick, I suppose. And, and he's getting a new stadium built out on the Relief Road for and the whole thing on that was he was told, well, you need to raise $1 million yourself and we'll see about the rest. He went and done a bloody house draw and got $1 million from it.
Listen, I should point out as well, and all I'm saying about Peak, they did then talk about buying the Aviva Stadium, to be fair. You know what I mean? So, I'm maybe being a bit too kind there. Isn't there? And I think at one stage there may have been a meeting with the council at some stage. It's pre-COVID, and I think Bill went to it. So, not sure how that ended up. Well, you might know someday.
Yeah. On that note then, where do you see Dundalk as a club going? I know it's very vague and it's hard to kind of put, because it's hard to look at us from week in, week out. I suppose I'll break that down into two. First and foremost, let's say off the field, where do you think Dundalk go? We're assuming now, we're going to talk about it later ourselves, but the letter sent out to the supporters club this week seemed to state that you get the impression that they're going to be here at least next year anyway. So do we think we're kind of stuck in this flux as we are this year?
Honestly, I have no idea. That's the thing. I think, but the fact it's the not knowing that is which in itself probably tells you where things are, it's more than anything. And I think that's I think so. I honestly don't know. The honest answer is I just don't know. And the amount of people I do know, the amount of people that do know, I think is small, and it's ever changing. I saw that letter, all right, and to be honest, I just thought it was very typical of a lot of the correspondence coming from that source. To be honest, it didn't really, it didn't really say anything. People, and it's not all about one person, right? It isn't. There's more to it than that. But the same person was joking about winning the Champions League and all this stuff, in the last year. I just don't. I don't really know if that's a commitment of anything. I don't know what constitutes official correspondence from the club anymore. I don't think people within the club really know what constitutes official correspondence from the club anymore. You don't really get too many circulars through the club from the ownership, and it's very hard really to establish who the club is even talking to anyone at any particular time. The board has had an unbelievable amount of changes over the last 12 to 18 months as well. There's people just dropping in and out of the board all the time. There's people on the board who no one has really ever heard from and of. And I think sometimes for reassurance, people like to think that there are these people in the background who are part of the formulation of some kind of plan. And you'd like to believe that would be the truth. But the more time passes, you realise that's probably not the case at all. And certainly any interactions I've had with people over the last year, I've had interactions with people who probably would have been involved with who like Peak Six don't own the club 100%, right? It's owned by more. It's not just one. Wasn't just one consortium of people involved. There was other people who owned a stake in the game. They've drifted away slowly in the background in terms of their seat on the board. Although I still think they'd have something in the holding company, but they're not on the board. And I'm not even sure at times they know what's been going on with the club. So there's been a lot of solo run correspondences at times over the last year. In fact, that's how a lot of things have been conducted. That's how managerial appointments have taken place. That's how contract discussions with people have taken place. So the idea that people would like to think that there's some wonderful strategy being formulated in the background, I don't really think that's the case. My impression of what's happened in recent months in terms of what's actually going on with the club right now, and I'm sure this has been said. I know there's a lot of podcasts and a lot of
just for Dundalk,
just for Dundalk. I mean, if you took time to listen to all of them on a weekly basis, you'd have no time to do anything else. But so if some of this has been spoken about, but I'm covering Dundalk, but I'm also covering other clubs and the national team and all of this. So I was doing a lot of Dundalk stuff for a while, maybe not so much in the last while. But my impression of what's happened in recent months is that, I mean, there was an absolutely incredible period of spending at the start of the year, and I think what's happened in recent times is that Matt Holsizer, as opposed to Bill Holsizer, has maybe looked at some of the spending that has gone on. And I think that possibly, from my information, would be that explains why all of a sudden you went from recruiting players for a lot of money to saying, "Oh, what's actually been going on here?" And as I said, I wouldn't lay everything at the door of Bill. I really wouldn't. But I mean, I think a lot of it starts from there. But obviously, the people who he has listened to or have reported to him, or who have encouraged the sanctioning of certain things, and however all of this has managed to come together and happen, I think there was obviously a reckoning period a while back where people said, well, the wage bill is what? The wage bill is what was, this has been spent on, and you're looking to now bring in, more players or hire a manager, say. But I mean, to go back around to your question, the initial question, and that should be pretty obvious to people when the priority, like the manager hunt went from, we've got hundreds of applications or expressions of interest to all of a sudden, with all due respect, they sort of needed to go with the most available and probably cheapest short-term option, who would be willing to come in and help without necessarily demanding an 18-month deal, which is the minimum you would expect to get a manager from somewhere else, from another job, say, and like that. Yeah. It was pretty obvious what's happening. And now the mood seems to have shifted more towards, well, they might be staying around, which, I don't know, it leaves you, I think it leaves people in two minds about what the best. And I don't know what the view amongst you guys is on that. I'm just talking a lot here, but I don't know what the sort of the vibe amongst other people is. Like, I see Donald there, and I read Donald's piece recently after I think it was Levadia game, which was strike when the iron is hot, or words to that effect. And I just couldn't agree more with that as a concept. Like, anyone who watched the European games, as far as I'm concerned, of any kind of Dundalk persuasion, and wasn't angry, I don't understand how you're programmed. I do not understand it. And I think, but in another way, I do sort of understand it, because I've been there as a fan of a club who doesn't want to believe things to be true, and can be defensive around anything that is said about the club, and the instinct might be to just defend the club at all costs and screw everyone who's having a go at us. And I know where that comes from as a concept and a mindset, but I just think I actually am a little bit surprised there hasn't been more anger. But I really do think that people have been beaten down by a relentless stream of stories and misery, to the point where you're in that dangerous place of apathy, which is the most dangerous thing of all, because then people start to believe that you start talking about things about, well, maybe there's a need to rebuild here, and this is part of this. It's like, why you need to rebuild when, like, 2 weeks ago, like, you pushed Vitesse Arnhem to the 90th minute, and really should have beaten them in reality. And now you're talking about, well, actually, maybe the best thing to do, the Dundalk's had its time, like all good dynasties come to an end. And all this absolute fucking nonsense, absolute nonsense, as though this is like the end of just some natural cycle, that everyone got to the end of their time in school or something and realized, well, listen, we all need to go off and do different things. Like, that's not what's happened here. And there is no, in my view, no rational response but to be anything but fuming with what has actually happened. And I also think from the perspective of people who are covering it sometimes that, and like you have to cover the story of what's happened, and you have to be very balanced at all times. But like there's versions of balance in this world. Like you can have balance on a TV panel show, but that means that you have to get the most sort of extreme far right view on and air it in the sake of balance. But there also comes around a point in a story where you have to do your job. You have to speak to all the people involved in it as a professional over a long period of time, get their opinion, get their view, get what happened, and form a conclusion and an opinion based on that. That means that when you go out and speak about it or write about it, that you are completely truthful in what you are presenting and giving people a flavour of the truth rather than the version of the truth that they want to read, because that's the one that causes them the least offence and the least anger. And I think that that's like the biggest problem that I think has been faced with some of this over the last while. And like I'm getting annoyed sort of talking about it here, possibly because I have a small bit of a stake in the game from my life, but you have to sort of step away from that in what you do. But like I would stand over anything that's been reported and anything that's been said, because it's a reflection of what has actually happened. And there is no other version of the story that can convince me that there's been like that it's not anything but an outrage what has actually happened over the last period of time. And I think that to me is formed from you can have your own opinion on it, but if people just look at the amount of good people, forget people who are paid employees and stuff, but because they could have their own view and their own hurt or whatever, but think of like a lot of the volunteers and people who've walked away from the club who have nothing but the best interest at the club at heart. And like I covered the John Delaney FAI years for a long period of time, and there was parallels in the sense that a lot, there was no one thing going on all the time, but you knew behind the scenes a lot of things that were going on, and people slowly but surely stepping away till the culture becomes absolutely toxic and broken. And I think there's massive parallels with what's going on there.
Do you think, Dan, just when you're saying that, that people can't get used to this kind of level of strange and craziness, you think is that where we've gone from with complete anger at the protests, and then you look at that as kind of all dwindled away now? Do you think we've all been not beaten down by?
I think beaten down is. I think beaten down is a word. Like I found the protest both. Like I was up there that night. I found it both like in one ways very important, and then just the other ways again the word just comes to mind. It's just very sad that it's come to this. Yeah. And like there is no doubt that there is I am coming on to it now. That the COVID thing is massive. Like it is so massive. The disconnect that people have felt, that the sort of powerlessness, and that's why in some ways, I do sort of understand a lot of the anger that comes the way of, say, people reporting it, because there's no one to lash out at sometimes. Sometimes going to a football can be therapeutic for a lot of people. You can just go along and you can release the anger and vent. But like the closed doors world has been such a sort of warped, like strange, surreal world. I'm lucky enough I've been able to go to games all the way through pretty much. And you appreciate in the bubble sort of how odd it is inside the bubble. I mean, there's been some players playing for the club who've never even experienced the proper, Oriel Park night yet. And also, there's no doubt that it's created a massive communication issue in terms of, how you conduct discussions with, say, people at the club. Like the most influential person at the club is the chairman, who hasn't been in Ireland since before COVID happened. I've had a discussion with that person. It's not an easy thing to do. Like we're all. I mean, we're doing it now through a sort of a podcast format or whatever. But when you have people that are so removed from it, and you're trying to set some kind of policy from there. I mean, people have left the club and gone here and there, and all of this has happened in a very strange way. But I do think a lot of things would have come to a head a lot quicker if the grounds had been open. And in some ways, like I think I'm from chatting to people I know up there, like the sort of people I know who are involved with the club who've stepped away, and they would say what the mood is like locally, and you lads are living it and feeling it in some cases. Dean, you're are you overseas at the moment, Dean? So not necessarily in your case.
Chicago,
the Chicago Supporters Club. That's the Chicago Supporters Club vibe.
But I'm outside Peak Six's office all the time.
Well, yeah, you are the Maxi of this generation, is it? But I think I'd be worried when I hear things like that people are sick of it now. But I do understand it. It's like they just want to go back and watch football and not have every football match descend into like a big debate around. And I get where that's coming from. But I'd just be more worried where the next development now is where there's language coming. And it's coming out of the club from people too. Well, there's a rebuild needed now and all this needs to happen now. And I'm thinking, you just want to be careful that you don't become that like you begin to it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, that it becomes that you talk about something for long enough that you convince yourself that it needs to be true. Like, the ingredients for a league winning team have been in the building inside the last 12 months, like certainly in sort of October, November, and obviously gradually it's been stripped away slowly but surely. But as you can see from recent weeks and recent performances, some of those ingredients are still very much there. But the idea that you can let that all go and build it up again and make it happen, make lightning strike twice. It's not true. Like a lot of the driving figures of the culture that made the club successful are drifting away slowly but surely. And it seems to me like the next stage of it for a lot of people is for more of them to go. And that should be worrying people.
Yeah. I suppose to bring it back to a football sense then as well, Dan, like we're in a scenario that probably a lot of Dundalk fans wouldn't be used to. Most of us on the podcast here are of a certain vintage. We remember relegation playoffs down in Waterford and things like that, and how close we got that time to going back down. And we remember the Division 1 days before that, before 2008. So we don't want to go back to that, but we do find ourselves in a situation right now that we are in a relegation playoff position. Now, bear in mind, you can go back and forward over games in hands, but I always say points on the board are probably more important. Like, does Vinny have enough, do you think, to get out of this right now? You look at the Vitas game, and that looks like a completely different team. But then you look at the Louth derby only last week, and like if you were showing both of those teams, you would say that there must be several years between these teams because they can't be the same players.
I think when push comes to shove, I don't think that should be an issue ultimately. I think Dundalk will be fine. Right? I do believe that. I think there's probably, but I spoke to another manager in the league last week about this topic, who sort of, their opinion was, it could happen, but then they'd win. Dundalk would win the playoff 11-0 or something. And I honestly, maybe 11-0 is a bit dramatic, but I certainly think. I think it's entirely possible Dundalk win the cup. I honestly really do. But maybe maybe that's a little bit dependent on the quarterfinal draw to some degree, and when McElhenney comes back, which may be a long way off, and it involves Cleary being fully fit. Say,
he was on the bench today.
Yeah, there's a couple of and certainly there's one or two injuries. When Houben went down before half time tonight, you were sort of looking at that going, right, that there are one or two things that could happen that could change things. Similarly, if Duffy was to suddenly pick an injury up. So I just find it impossible to believe it. And I know, like, I'm facing this I'm facing this sort of mad situation of my having to like eat humble pie to Jerry Malone, who a couple of weeks back, called it that they'd be in the playoff, and I absolutely slated him, thinking I'd be safe enough to rule out relegation as an option. And now I feel it's going to go. Jerry, and I say this to Jerry, I said it to his face. Jerry, like throughout 2016, always used to be like, telling me that the Dundalk were going to lose to such and such a team every week, and 20 or 33-1 or whatever price they were to beat. Now they're going to win tonight, but he could be onto something here. But no, deep down, I can't believe that's the case. I don't think the league is strong enough that, and I do think there's enough games on grass pitches between the end of the season, and if when the time comes, I think Oriel's a lottery. I really do still think it's a particularly if you have a team with patching in it, and Murray and a certain type of player. It just, patently just doesn't suit them. But I think there's enough games there away that results will probably be claimed. But that's obviously, again, it's the language you use. Like, if you end up in a situation where you start to think about being happy that like relegation has been avoided, you've completely lost the plot. This is the biggest wage bill in the country by a street, maybe in history. And you're playing against sort of some part-time teams, and that we're even having this discussion, to me, is unbelievable. It's almost unforgivable. So if that could be a version of a victory, and maybe people dust themselves down and say, well, we've learned from our mistakes, which is something you've heard about. We've learned from the mistakes, and we're going to, things are going to be right next year. It's like, if it's the same people making the decisions, I think at this stage we can safely say a team that's gone from being the best team in the country to to a relegation battle, I'm just not so sure if they've earned the credit in the bank, really, to sort of to get about like that. I feel some sympathy for Vinny, I have to say, going back in there. I wasn't sure about it. I think I've probably said it to him, that I sort of would have felt that there was a danger he would end up in a situation where he's out front trying to defend things that he can't, that aren't necessarily all of his doing. I think we're seeing that probably happening already to some degree. But also, it's also true to say that there was, there were some reservations in the dressing room about him coming back. And that's because things got so weird, I think, in 2020 that I think a lot of relations were strained around the place. And I think it's obviously a challenge for him coming up that in some ways, like, the players can't escape grief here at all. There's too much of a discrepancy between the performances in Europe and some of the league performances to just say, well, the chaos at the club is explains everything. It explains a lot of it, but it doesn't explain all of it. And I think the slight issue you face is that like, Vinny's obviously trying to keep the club up with a lot of players who maybe in some cases may not be too sure about him necessarily. In some cases, or just may not have a terrific relationship. But you have to sometimes work with people you don't have a great relationship with. But a lot of others who aren't going to be at the club next year, they know it already. I think it's hard to it would just make you a small bit worried. But at the same time, I still think that the quality is there. That when push comes to shove, but it shouldn't be the discussion. The target should still be to finish fourth, realistically. And if that team played to its potential, it could pick up enough points to finish in the top four comfortably. Albeit the McElhenney and McMillan injuries, pretty badly timed. The McElhenney one in particular, because he was starting to show the player everyone knows he can be. Just a good thing he wasn't let go in the summer, which, in fairness, I think Vinny stopped that one.
Yeah, I think the other one had already done too much. I think, would I be right in saying, though, the next three fixtures are Waterford, Finn Harps, and then Longford. So
is Longford first before Finn Harps? Is that? I'm not thinking. Maybe I could be wrong. I could be wrong there.
Yeah.
The big one, Waterford have improved. It's not like Waterford have improved, and that's a dangerous game with the with the I know that the international duty is an issue, and you have this weird situation where Michael Duffy is like this weekend. I think the Dundalk people are in the unusual situation of hoping no Ireland players get injured, because Duffy is going to be one of the next ones in. So if anything happens over the weekend to Aaron Connolly or trying to think who else is in there, Troy Parrott or because they're all in the James McLean, say Ronan Curtis, actually probably in particular. If anything happens to any of them over the weekend, then Duffy might get the call. That's the danger. That is the danger. If people had maybe explored the rule book at the start of the season, the participation agreement that they'd signed into, they might have realised that international windows might become something of a problem if you sign a number of international players. But I mean, some people might think this is part of some conspiracy against the club. Others would say, you signed into the participation agreement. Maybe you're not as clever as you might think.
Dan, before we let you go, just we had a couple of wee questions in there. Just Frank had asked if about any other groups who might be interested in a takeover. There's plenty of rumours locally going around. So have you heard anything yourself? Not that you can kind of go into. I'm sure you're probably hearing the same rumours we're all hearing.
Yeah. Well, I did. I mean, there was a bit of a rumours going in completely non-Dundalk circles, like not the Dundalk rumour mill, which is obviously pretty volatile, as you know. But
I think we start most of them. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's it's the so much to say really here. Everything started on social media. Social media is social media isn't a person. Like social media isn't like it's just.
You can't point the finger at that person and say that's social media and it's your fault.
It's an inanimate object that just churns out things, So there's a lot of things on social media. I did hear from someone in football circles. Did heard about something about a different American consortium, and it was from someone who would have no reason to lie. Put it that, and will be someone involved with who would be interested about moving players to different places and stuff like that. So they'd be very curious and have their ear to the ground. But I asked some people about that who I thought would know, and they weren't so sure. I did assume that some people who were loosely involved with the club, or depending on your definition of loosely involved with the club, would have some kind of background in, say, putting together consortiums and stuff like that. And I wondered was something going on there as well too. Again, conflicting messages on that as well. And I mean, as I said, the latest chat is that a lot of it is dependent on the people who have it at the moment being willing to hand it over. And again, it's one of these things where you think, is there some plan here? Is there some grand plan? But at the moment, I'm not so sure about, say, what the balance sheet is likely to be at the end of the year. And the list of assets, if you only have one or two players under contract, say, wouldn't be massively appealing. So again, I've probably heard a lot of the same rumors as anyone else, but nothing that would reassure you at this stage. But I do think there would be interest. The one thing, there was a while back when there was the chat about the peaks, the real strong chat that they were going to go, and that was certainly a view that I think was held in the FAI. I think that they seemed to think that this would be happening. I know there was an element of concern there about this, because I think there is an awareness of what a Dundalk capitulation would mean for the image and perception of the league. I think it would be quite damaging because, as I said earlier, they've been the standard setters. And sometimes what you'll have is that, the FAI and people there will try and push consortiums and people, who come expressing an interest towards a club. And I think there would probably be a willingness to try and help there in some way, because they know it would be bad. But again, at times I've had conversations with people at the FAI who would ask me what's the story with Dundalk, what's happening there. And again, most of the people who will decide this stuff haven't been in the country for some time. So that's what anyone can hear in the ground. They're only hearing it from, they're hearing it on the grapevine from people who are hearing, the few people who have a direct line to people who actually make decisions in the States.
Yeah. Just someone wants to know if you're still posting on Oriel Web.
No, sadly not.
You're waiting. You let Jerry do that instead.
No. I mean, the thing about Oriel Web is the absolute irony of because lockdown drives you to depths of boredom, and sometimes people will say.
Oriel Web though.
But sometimes, again, people would say, I don't read any of this stuff on social media. I don't read any of it myself. I hear about it, and they're basically lying, right? I mean, they do read a lot of the stuff. So there's one or two screen grabs were sent to me of things that have been suggested or said about some kind of deep south conspiracy that I think I was involved in to try and sort of, I don't know. So I mean, just genuinely like.
This sounds like a QAnon origin.
Off the wall stuff, like yeah, exactly. I mean, but I did think there was a certain irony in that, many years ago, setting up a message board that you one day would be libeled or slandered on, not knowing that this would be the case, that like you'd have your integrity and all this sort of called into question, or that actually that you were like secretly delighted by everything that was happening, that everything that was going on at Dundalk, that you were actually like some kind of undercover agent that was absolutely chuffed by all of this that's actually happening, like, which is just absolute madness. Like, I just sort of like I can walk up the stairs now and there's like I have an artist's impression of Oriel, which someone gave me as a present, a family member a couple of years back, one of these prints. Like, because that that sort of is somewhere I went a lot in my younger years, but now of course you are part of you're reveling and enjoying this, and you really want this, like you really want like all these wins, you're absolutely buzzing about this, just because occasionally you make snarky comments about like the absolute insanity of what has happened. To answer your question, no, I haven't posted on Oriel Web, but at one point I was tempted to figure out that I still have my old login, but I don't think I do. I think it's
Angry Intromiskin, isn't it?
It's under different ownership now, so I'm I couldn't actually sue myself if I decided to go down that route. I don't think, I don't know.
And just finally, and we'll let you go. Thanks so much for your time. Just when I was listening to your to the podcast this week, and you were reminiscing with Shamrock Rovers in Belgrade that time, and what it done for Irish football, and you were saying it was really one of those standout memories for you in Irish football. I mean, I'm presuming that being able to follow Dundalk through the highs over the past while, we've definitely contributed something in there too.
Listen, yeah, no, and I mean, as I said, like times change, and like I'm sort of like I'm working in the media now, and it is different. Like it is. There's no doubt it's different, but I mean, it's like 2016. Like as I said earlier, there's nothing like it. Like there'll never be anything like that for me, really, in terms of like, and that's this sounds very sort of like sound like a bit of a prick saying it, but like I've been really lucky, I've been to World Cups and World Cup finals and stuff like that, like really privileged to do that stuff. But I don't think anything would give me a buzz like 2016. And to be fair, any of the Irish clubs doing well in Europe, I get a buzz out of it, and maybe that's where I've lost some of my my sort of what's that sort of respect as a sort of the Dundalk fan sense, because I like to see them all doing well, because it is a great buzz for work, and really in the world that I live in, where you're trying to push for more coverage because it's good for you. You get to cover more high profile games and see more places and be in the center of the action a bit more. But like nothing will compare with 2016 for me. Like could have walking around Alkmaar. Alkmaar is the one that springs to mind for me anyway. Walking around Alkmaar on the day of the game. Like seeing people you know from going to games sort of 20, 25, 30 years almost in some cases, and like they're there in Holland watching Dundalk play Europa League group stage game, which is surreal when you can remember a time sort of traveling like halfway around the country, with sort of 10 or 12 or 15 other people, like going to every game in the 98-99 season, home and away, when they were when the relegation was the end, taking half days from school and like writing match reports on Oriel Web, giving everyone 3 out of 10 and calling everyone pricks, like and all this. And
sounds like what we do now.
Yeah. I mean, I've a great respect for it because it's an important role. I remember going to UCD, starting college in UCD, because I've been away from Loud for a while, as some people point out, like an accent and stuff like that. But seeing Aaron Callaghan sign into the same, like you should sign into the same, like in college you'll have these, back in the day where before everyone was on laptops, you have to sign into the PCs,
Oh yeah, you have to be allocated one.
Aaron Callaghan signing in, because he must have been like a mature student or something. I don't know what he was doing there. Having heard recently that like he wanted to kick you up the arse because you gave him like something like 0 out of 10 for some match report. like, and you look back on some of the things that you sort of would have done. It's like it's insane. But like, there's a lot of the people I know, like that I went to games with all up and down the country back then, who you see them in 2016, you're thinking this is unbelievable that this is happening, like just really like out of this world. And to think, you know, that you could get to the stage where people were almost complacent about winning leagues. Because when I started going to Dundalk first, it was 1992, 93, which was just coming off the back of a really successful era where actually there was a bit of apathy creeping in.
Yeah.
And the league was won in 95, but again, even at that stage, there was like 1,500 people there. Like people were spoiled by success. And I'm just worried, you know, that there's a danger of heading back towards something like that again now, because people have had such a high bar that even mid-table is such a disappointment compared to what you've seen. And you have this situation where there's I think even the profile of people who go to games, it's based on the generations of when they started to go. And there was actually very few people my age going when I went first, because, you know, it wasn't, when I was sort of 12, 13, 14, it wasn't a fashionable thing to do or like a popular thing to do to necessarily go to Oriel around that time. And the real fear is that like you could end that road again, and that's why this can't be lost. You know, it really can't be lost. But I mean, it's well on the way to being lost, and that's the frustration with it. But to go back to it, like 2016 and probably that one in particular, just probably elevated things to another level. It's possibly very hard to ever probably compete with that again, because there was probably an innocence about it that made it all the more special, and you can't necessarily regain that or reclaim that. But I just hope that what happens between now and the end of the year, like that there's that a voice can be found, and that sort of there's sort of proper consultation with people there, that people realize that it's a really important club. You know, and it matters to the community, and it matters to a lot of people, and a lot of people who really care and have been driven away. Like, you have to listen to them and ask why, and make sure that they're involved in whatever happens going forward. But I'm not sure I'm feeling too optimistic about that right now.
I hope we didn't bring down your optimism being on the show.
No, this is the most uplifting hour and a half we've had in a long time. It's actually
it counts to community therapy. So if you're ever in trouble, you say you're locked in here. And it counts.
I'm actually going to invoice you for therapy off the back of this, but like, you know, like
most people do.
You know, in the course of the podcast we do, you can only, like, someone complained recently there's too much Dundalk chat, and I understand it, but like there's so much to it. It is in some ways, as you said at the start, it's the gift that keeps on giving, and that it's a fascinating story. But behind it, like there's obviously a real there's a sad side to it, and you can see from the volume of podcasts and etc. And that's a lot of people care, and there's a lot of actually people. I saw, like, Dean had your letter recently, which I saw that went on social media and stuff. I think there are like a lot of people around. And maybe like during the good years, even pre-Peak Six, maybe there was a small bit of complacency as well, in a way too, that there was mistakes that happened then as well too, you know, in terms of that has left everything. I think I'm saying this from the outside, but my impression of it is that there should be more. With the amount of people that do care, there should be some more of a coherent organisation there behind it. And it's taken this to get to that, and like that's obviously something that shouldn't have happened either. But you could talk about it all day, but you know, I should probably go to bed.
Yeah, well, look, thank you so much for giving us your time. Look, I know we've been trying to get you on all season, and you just had to get a gap in the schedule, so you really do appreciate you giving us some time tonight.
No problem. And, maybe talk again in the future, hopefully.
Absolutely.
See you next week.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see you in Oriel well anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Angry and RD suddenly signs up, and
we know what it is.
You know exactly what's happened. All right. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much for your time, pal. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Well, I think, you know, there's a couple of home truths in there from Dan, and judging by, you know, the comments and stuff coming in, I don't think too many people disagree with a lot of what Dan brought up there, which is it's funny when he was talking about, that even there at the end, kind of saying that, we have to be careful about the complacency. What always comes back to me is when young kids in this town, turn around and just say, when's our cup final this year? When are we going to the Aviva? What date is that this year? Like it's in the diary that we're in the final. When are we lifting the trophy? That was the one previous to that. When are we doing the trophy lifting? Yeah, what date is that? Yeah, I'll try to make sure I'm free for that. This is unfortunately where we're all part of probably to blame on that too. So I think everybody probably enjoyed it. Thanks, lads, for your input on that, by the way.
If you'd stop asking questions so quickly.
Yeah, I tried to jump in once, but
he actually covered a question I was going to ask him, and I
could read your mind, Gally.
a bit about the managers and just the fact that they kind of went through all these managers to look at it, and they ended up on Vinny, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask. It was like almost pure delusion for a couple of weeks that they were going to pay extortion amount of money, and then they were kind of maybe brought back down to earth by Matt. But yeah, look, that's like you said at the end. Dan was a guest. We were not actively trying, but it is someone. It was on our wish list. There was someone to get on and speak, but just the League of Ireland in general. But yeah, it's great to hear. Just not gossip. It's just from the other side of it, and yeah, it was fascinating. There's certain people you can just bring on and just let them go at it, and it makes our job very, very easy.
I'll have to have like a situation where you just raise your hand so I know you have a question to ask. I don't have Pingu's awkward silence again, Donald. That was all.
But you only asked the question I'm going to ask you.
We had two Pingus during the middle of that, which is
sometimes you should mirror yourself at one stage.
I think I'm.
Yeah.
I think I might be gone again.
You're not gonna. You're still holding it. You're holding it. You're all right. Gents, look,
my connection only went twice during that interview.
It's still better than Danny, so we'll hold you there.
Poor Danny.
I suppose we'll get on to one or two things. We'll try to wrap this up a little ourselves. So this week we've had, and Pingu, it's something you've asked and called for over the past few weeks, was a letter from the supporters club to the board. It did happen this week. You kind of did send something back on it. You just probably didn't think it packed the punch it needed, was it? You're still there. Go for it.
I'm still there. All right. Okay. Yeah. No. I think if I trying to stay positive, I think it's great that they did actually put out a letter to the club. I mean, as I say, it's great that they've done it and they listed out their objectives. I don't know if anybody's seen that. Actually looked at the post on Facebook. They had 2 comments underneath. It was a 3-page letter that they sent to the club with their short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. The one thing they didn't do that kind of disappointed me is they didn't actually ask Peak 6 were they going to be here next year.
Yeah, which I think is what you'd originally asked.
That was what we were wanting, that kind of way. But look, it's a good first step that they done it. I don't know, I assume most of the people listening seen it today that they actually got a set up. Their bank account came through today, so you can actually pay to be a member of the supporters club. Yeah. And just before we kind of go on to Pete Six's response, like going back just a couple of minutes ago when you were talking about that complacency, I think Chris, Gally, and myself, especially, sorry for leaving you out, Donald. We're like the mainstream Aussies here, but I think we said it back in 2015 when we won the league title in 2014. We made that attempt to get a successful supporters club going because we said the success isn't going to last forever. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, and our supporters are brilliant, and I don't mean this in a way that's gonna talk shite about our support, but we didn't get that. And Gally, you know, especially kind of after myself and Chris kind of stepped away for various reasons, but the support
not together now, like we didn't fight. No. Now they're going to know that part.
Well, we did, but no, we didn't know. But like we didn't get that support that we needed at the time, and I think again our support did get complacent, and we got kind of blinded by the success that we had. And now we're in a situation where it's great now that this supporters club has been set up, and I've seen there's a Lily White Lady supporters club has been set up this week, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
but it shouldn't take a crisis for that to happen, you know. And I've said it before, and this isn't a slight on the people that were involved in the Dundalk FC Supporters Trust that ended up becoming volunteers. And I think some of those might be people that Dan was referencing earlier that went on to have significant roles in the club.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mistake for me, the biggest mistake for me that was made is the trust should never have disbanded. I remember they released a statement at the time saying, you know, this takeover with fast fix, the trust members are going to be involved, you know, in volunteer capacities. So there's no need right now for a trust. There should always be a need for something. And it may have been a case that those people just weren't interested in being involved in, and that's completely fine. But they could have handed that over to someone. And I'd say someone like the likes of ourselves that were trying to set up supporters clubs around, like it was a couple of years later. But I think that for me, over the last, all that success we've had, I think that's the biggest misstep, you know, is that the Supporters Trust after 2012, when the takeover happened, that time was just gone. It was null and void. And we as supporters probably didn't ask the questions of those lads. It's not saying that they just said it wasn't going ahead. Maybe people just didn't look to keep it going either, you know what I mean? I think we all just accepted it very quickly. And but when you look back, and when we look back on the end of 2014 and 2015, when we tried to get this is why we tried to get that supporters club set up in 2015. Unfortunately, it didn't work at the time. So I just hope now people start backing both the new supporters club, the 1903, and the Lily White Lady Supporters Club. And let's it has to be long term. It has to be beyond Peak Six. It can't just be looking at the present. It has to look at it has to be here forever now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it has to, and it has to exceed all the people that's involved. And I just hope, I hope for everybody's sake, I hope they get the response that they're hoping on both counts.
Yeah, exactly. Lads, I'll come to you, Donal, I suppose, and then Gally after. The response then from the board, Donal, what way did you take it?
I had written a bullshit response from them. I honestly had written it about 5 minutes before the actual response came in, and I thought the bullshit made-up response that I had written was a better one than they did. So the problem I have with, like, it's great.
I'm going to just see if I can just throw it up, Donal, while you're talking. Yeah, continue.
Great. It's only about 2 lines, but it's great that they sent the letter. It's great that, you know, there's an attempt at communication. But the problem I had was if the letter had said, "What's going on? Are you staying? What's happening?" Would any of us have believed it if they said, yeah, we're staying? Like, there's nothing to any of the words that they're going to say now, because they haven't said they're leaving and they haven't said they're staying. So, like, we've all heard these rumors. We've all heard all the horrible stuff, all the bad stuff, all the potential that's coming down the line. And I just don't think they could say anything except, "Right, lads, we're going," that any of us would have accepted as an honest and realistic response to it. And I think the problem, like Pinky was saying there, like, because we're coming at this now at a stage of desperation, that because we all have our backs to the wall on this, any communication, the guys have to be careful. Obviously, the supporters club have to be careful how they communicate with owners and everybody else. But we're at a situation there where, like, there's pretty much nothing they can say that's going to be good enough, because we're in this just ungodly mess. And that was my issue with it. Like, I expected what they said to have a little bit more polish, if I'm being honest. What Peak Six, what Bill responded to, I thought would have a little bit more polish and be like, at least make an attempt at addressing some of the rumors that they know are going on. So I was surprised, but also not surprised at the exact same time. But I think that was just my feeling before we got a response to it. Was like, does anybody really care what this says, unless it says we're pumping loads of money back in and we're staying, or "You're right, lads, we're gone."
Yeah. Well, I think sorry, I know Galley's coming in next, but I think one of the issues as well is, the supporters club letter was addressed to Matt Holsizer, and it was replied to by Bill, as well. So that again, does it lose a little bit of credibility? I mean, look, it's good that the club did give a response, even if it is there's not a lot of substance to it, but you've addressed it to someone else. So why is there somebody else replying to it?
Yeah, Gally.
Yeah, it's like a 9-year-old wrote it. I'd say the original draft of this was written in crayon, and then it was typed out from because you couldn't read it. It wasn't legible. Like the line on actively seeking more community sport. They're not actively seeking anything. People are coming up with ideas. So that the likes of the supporters club, the likes of the Lily White Ladies, they've got rid of all the volunteers, and then they're actively seeking community sport. I wouldn't even say he wrote it. It's such a feeble attempt at a response. Like, you're talking to the supporters club of the club you owned, you took over. What are we talking? 5 years ago? It's such a weak effort. Like, to throw Ailish Kelly under the bus, like, that's what they've done here. Like, charged her with the volunteer effort. Like, Ailish is enough to be doing up there. Like, just to name check herself and Paddy Casey, it's like pass the buck. I don't even think he wrote it. Like I say, I don't know what they were expecting. Like Donald says, unless they come back with emphatic answer on something, yes or no for next year. Do you really care what it says? Like, there's so much wrong up there. It's just like that response is just shocking. It's not even typed right. There's no way he wrote that. Like, they've got Kelly with a small K, for God's sake. Like, you can't even type right. If that's a secretary, she needs to go as well. Or he.
There you go.
No, it's such a feeble attempt. It's just look, just send them this out. It's like a generic letter. Just send it out.
Yeah.
It'll be right.
My favourite viewer, Emily Perry, I don't know if anybody knows her. She said there that Bill definitely didn't write the email because the language isn't used with American verbiage. So there we go. That's it, definitive now. So
exactly. There you go, Emily.
She said it on the true. I'll back her 110%.
Yeah.
You would.
And nobody like if it's an official letter, I wouldn't say Dundalk FC either. It'd be Dundalk Football Club.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even I don't sign Castletown Bells letters like that. Emails of Castletown Bells Football Club on the bottom.
Yeah, and just the comment came in there as well. Like, I actually seen that, I couldn't believe it myself. In the afternoon there, there were 500 tickets for today hadn't sold out at one stage. I don't know if it did in the end or not, but there was a time where tickets in Oriel Park were gold dust. So how did it come to this for 500 tickets?
I think Dan hit the nail on the head. People have just been dropped down a level. People have just been, I can't remember the term we used, but they've just been defeated. It's just kind of just lay down, and people don't want to go. It's not that they don't want to go up. That's wrong. But I think they're just fed up with it. I think they're just completely, like, I know it's mocked as like, look at it, and that it's not been
still though. People who haven't seen a game of football in a year and a half or more.
Yeah.
500 tickets should fly out, but
it should be gone within minutes. Yeah.
I think for myself, it's the opening line. The board are actively seeking more community support and help. From what I've seen from the club in the past, in particular year or longer, it seems to have done the complete opposite to that. They've driven away a lot of volunteers, driven away people who had invested time and effort and sweat into Dundalk Football Club. And they've just, brushed them away. We know what we're doing here. We're going to bring in people who can do all of this. And I've just seen the complete opposite. And look, I'm probably going to get personal on this one. And look, you lads knew this was coming at some stage tonight. But, the club has just decided that the production company that I currently work with will no longer be doing the streaming. And within that production company, including myself, nearly half the staff were local. We were in the community. To just go, and they brought in a UK company to do it now instead. And look, Pingu, like, me and you were there, part of the club when Shop Dundalk was happening. And I was going around with Fintan outside of businesses in this town, recording little video segments and playing it back. And we were trying to galvanize the club and the local community coming out of a recession. We were trying to marry everyone together in saying, you know, like your chance here to get on, you know, for a international, thinking of the B-Top campaign as well, but, you know, for brands to get on an international platform, to be seen all around the world, they were trying to tie that back into the club and everything. And I think for the club to go and, you know, I understand it probably came down to finances with us, but we had already said that if there's any interest, any problems with finances, that we would work with the club no matter what. In particular, myself, when you think, when the COVID break initially happened and we were to come back, and myself and another colleague who was part of the streaming on this, we set up the initial streaming of the Bows and the Derry match. I don't know if you remember the Adrian and Gavin done.
Yeah.
Back, you know, it was the first trial. How can we do this? Then we came back again. When I tried to get the production company in, then we couldn't because the whole Watch LOI thing was kicking off. But, you know, we came back at Bows at the start of this year. And I think everyone will agree we changed how Watch LOI was done. Suddenly there was co-coms on it. You know, at that time we had replays and everything that the Watch LOI hadn't got. So we've been on this journey with the club for at least a year and a half. And to be just told, that's it. You know, after the Loud Derby, you guys are finished. No real, well, can we work with you on this? No, we didn't get anything like that. And I think to let people go who are working on that within this local community, to go and bring in another company who's actually not even in this country, I just think that's 100% what is wrong with Dundalk Football Club right now. I have been a volunteer or worked in that club now for, God, way over 10 years in a volunteer capacity or whatever. And I just think this is what's wrong. There's too many people who do not realize what this club means to a community and what the community can do back for this club. And just an act like that, I think, is just another nail in the coffin. It's part of the reason why 500 tickets didn't bloody sell out.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And that's, look, I was meant to go to the game today and I actually didn't want to go near Oriel Park today because I was annoyed. I was annoyed at the club that I love had gone and treated me like that. And that's so wrong. Do you know, like Dan said tonight, there's people who go up to Oriel Park, who need Oriel Park and need football as a way to vent and, you know, just get away from whatever. And that's what that's what the club provided to this local community. And if the club can't try in any way to keep local community individuals, talented individuals, I'm not saying I'm the talented one, by the way, but talented people working within the club and helping the club move forward, like we did when the club originally came around to me and said, Chris, how the hell do we stream? I was like, I'll find out ways. We worked with them at the start, and I think everyone will remember at the start when we were streaming the broadband that was up there, it wasn't acceptable. And it was jumping. You guys were all laughing, saying we were watching still by still every couple of seconds. But now we pushed the club to get a good broadband line in there. And it's, you know, it's one of the best, I would say, in the company, with a real strong upload speed. Because we told them what the necessity and the need to get that line in and how that'll benefit. And now just to say, you know what, whether you guys are costing too much or whatever, shouldn't have been the thing. It should have been, look, you guys have been here from the start. We can't afford to pay you what you've done. So what can you do for us? We want to work with you. Like from everyone I talked to on the production, they were like, look, we will work with Dundalk Football Club. We're happy to do that. We wouldn't have gave up our time. A lot of the guys who I had, some of them were working on horse racing, who gave up horse racing dates, assuming we had dates till the end of this year. Now we've been told for the next 5 home matches, we're not needed. These guys have turned down work. So, you know, I just think these are the things that the club has absolutely kicked this community over again and again over the past while. And that's why we had protests. That's why we now have a letter being sent to a board. Like, it's not acceptable.
Yeah, I
My
think.
rant's
Look,
done.
no, I think, Chris. I think
Was that a rant?
you've hit the nail on the head there, because not every supporter that's listening into this are going to know that 10, 11 years ago, you and Craig Gartland were going down to games and all you got was a rain jacket. Do you know what I mean? Like, you weren't getting paid to do it. You were recording games, and by the next morning you were turning around that game to managers in a time before there was match analysis. So they were able to analyse the games, you know what I mean? And you were able to do it, I think, even in a couple of hours, if I'm not mistaken, for Fozzie.
Yeah. I used to trot around to Fozzie's house that night, yeah.
Yeah, when I was involved there, so it's like you've evolved your role within the club into this here, and I know it got into a position where you're able to actually earn some money from it, or the company that you're working for are able to earn some money from it, which I think, given all the success we've had, why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't anybody that's volunteered their time? Mm-hmm. And it's just, look, I brought up names last week about 2012, but if we look even in the last 18 months, the club has lost, and I'm going to name names, I try not to name names, but the club has lost people like Colin Murphy, Simon Blackmore, the whole Taft family, who, when you think about what they went through a little over 12 months ago, and I seen tonight a couple of the members of the Taft family were at a Larne game and went to Oriel Park when there's 500 people allowed in, and now to hear this story about you, it's like, it's hard. Again, like I said last week, it's just upsetting, and it doesn't feel. People come and go, right? And I'm not saying that things don't change, but you have people that have been a mainstay, and I forgot to even mention David Caldwell, who was involved in the club for probably as long as you, even possibly longer, and it's people who are a mainstay in the club. There's people who you just they're going to be there, are now not there, and they've been pushed out, and it's not a case of their time has come to an end. It's a case of simply you're gone, and we're going to make it as difficult as possible for you to stay. You know what I mean? And it's just very sad. And again, as I said last week, there's times where it doesn't feel like Dundalk FC anymore. It doesn't feel like the Dundalk FC that I've known for 15 years or more, since I was able to start going to games regularly. And that's the part that I just can't wrap my head around, because up until 18 months ago, it still was that club, albeit it was a lot more successful than it was 15 years ago. But it was that same Dundalk FC. There was there was some different faces in there, but I never felt like the ownership, the people involved in the club, were trying to change the club that drastically.
Yep.
And just to see that change has just been very hard to take, and I just feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for the company you work for, but I feel sorry for you on a personal note, because I know everything you've put into that, and I'll get a few brownie points with Emily tonight now, because I was nice to you as well. So. But no, but I make a joke about it, but I'm serious.
I appreciate the comments coming in from people here. Look, and I'm getting a few messages on my phone there as well, and I appreciate that from it. And it's not the reason. I don't want anyone to think that's the reason I brought it up. The whole reason I brought it up is I'm more annoyed that they couldn't find some way, because the streaming has to happen. Part of your FAI participation agreement is the games had to be streamed to the end of the year, no matter what. So how we couldn't find a way to keep people working within the local community in that, I'm absolutely flabbergasted by that.
The question has to be, who called the shots on it? Like, who's making these decisions? Like, it's not the boys in the States. So they're not saying they don't care.
Well, I'm sure they're signing checks at the end of the day, and I'm sure.
Of course, but sure, it's not like you're charging 50 grand a game.
You need to make that, obviously, as a revenue source. The stream probably didn't make the money they were looking versus the overheads and the cost. But I think if that happens, like we did sign a contract at the start, based till the end of the year, and possibly next year if it was needed. But I think nearly everyone that worked on it would have said, hey, we don't mind, scrap that original agreement. What does it take for us to keep this doing until at least the end of the year? Let's do that.
I think that's the harshest thing. That's the harshest thing, is that you offered it. You offered to renegotiate, you offered to speak again. And that's the part for me that I just find hard to understand, that even if they had no intention of staying with you, that they wouldn't entertain that conversation. They wouldn't have that conversation with you. Like, that's that's again as a common courtesy they should be doing, especially given that there's local people involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Like on the plus side, there's an under 9s game at the Ball and Shock tomorrow, and you can stream that with parents' permission. Listen, the view is going to be spectacular at the Ball and Shock in Falmouth. half 12 kickoff.
To be fair, you done a bucket collection today for me, so yeah, I'm there.
That's it. Yeah, we go. There's tea and slushies in Fatima stores.
Right, get off me, lads. I don't like the limelight. I'm done with that.
Phones hopping
we'll quickly go around for man of the match. We've a good few in already for man of the match, so it's pretty 50-50, I would say. No, it's not. It's not at all, Chris. It's probably more in one way. Donal, I'll come to you first because you're looking like you're nodding and dying to say something. So.
When you said it was 50-50, I was like, I don't think it is. I think it's pretty unanimous. Who's the?
I looked at the first ones and I was like, oh, and then it was like, no. At least people know I do go through the comments, by the way.
It's hard to judge anybody. Like Dan was saying, it's hard to judge anything really on the opposition tonight. But I thought Ben Omar was good, did some good things. Yeah. But I think scoring a hat-trick, annoying Pingu.
I love how you put that as a bonus, by the way.
Yeah, we see that wasn't the main reason why I was going to vote for him no matter what he did. But he just happened to score 3, so I look like I'm going with Patrick Hooven because he scored 3 goals, and I guess no other reason at all, just that he scored 3.
Gally.
Yeah, I'm with Donal.
I'm building up to Pingu at the end here.
Hooven, I mean, look. From listening to the end of the game, it was anybody but Han, according to the boys on Dundalk FM. But
he got an awful slate in there.
He got awful. I couldn't believe when the goal came up in the 73rd minute, he was still on. But no, he scored a hat trick in an FAI Cup. What were we talking? Hat trick in 10 minutes, was it?
Yeah, 10 minutes. 51, 52, and 61.
Unless the keeper saves 3 penalties, there's not really much that's going to.
He had a cracking game there, keeper too.
Yeah, just seen someone say that. All over it. Pat Hooven all the way. Sorry, Pingu.
Dean.
Yes.
Go.
Well, you know something, brother. I'm gonna go with. Did you like that one, Donal?
I was wondering when it was going to happen.
Yeah.
I let the Mean Street Posse one go earlier. I was just like, that was too serious a conversation. I couldn't get involved.
Yeah, I'm gonna surprise you all. I'm gonna go with Hulk Hooven. He look, I as I say, I thought he was poor in the first half, but he proved me wrong in the second half. So any player that scores a hat trick, I mean, they're there or thereabouts. Sammy had a great game. I don't know why everyone is so against Han. I actually thought in the second half, especially when he went out on the right, I thought he'd done very well.
Yeah.
But I think if we're going overall, I would say Hooven.
For the clean slate, I would also go with Hooven. I just think, look, he stood up in the second half. Probably not his best first half.
Probably.
But I'm thinking that there was a corner coming in, he headed it clear at the front post, so got a defensive side to his job.
I take it all back. I said about you, Chris.
This is why I lost.
He won a throw in after clearly booting the ball out from near the edge of the box. So that was pretty good. It was like a magician trick that he pulled off.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so look, for me too, it's Hooven. And look, judging by nearly everyone's comments, bar the first 3 that I counted, I thought we were going to have a real go at it here. And everyone else is pretty much there with Hooven as well. And random, I think we'll go with Brona Boothman. I think I've seen her comment a good few over the course of the few shows. So congratulations, Brona. If you get in contact with Tony's Pizzeria, there's a pizza there for us. Hey, and take the picture like everyone seems to be doing now on Twitter so we can see what pizza you got.
Pizza.
It's always fun. And none of it ever makes it to us. And so, gents, I just said I'd put it out there, lads. I'm down revenue, so I don't know. I'm feeding my family. We're back to league form next week, away to Waterford. I mean, you look at our current form in the league, Waterford's current form in the league. It's not going to be pretty, but like, is there something salvageable here at all, or are we on the road for a hiding? Donal?
Oh, I don't know if we're on the road for a hiding, but the problem, I think it seems like we've been saying this a couple of times now, but the problem is going to be what players we have fit. We're obviously going to lose Rivas, and we're going to lose Sonny, and regardless of what anybody thinks of their quality, it's just bodies that are going to miss. Mm-hmm. So Darley, he wasn't involved tonight. He has to come back next week. Like, he has to be fit, because there's very few other players that we have to put in positions. And then, yeah, I mean, the form thing is like, the form thing is crazy, because you're like, if you the league results are the league results and the league performances are the league performances, but you still can't be like, how can they have those performances in Europe and not transfer any of it to a massive game? But I don't have a huge amount of faith in them, but I have not picked against them, I don't think, all season.
Oh, Jesus.
And I'm not going to pick against them on Friday. So 1-0.
All right. Play. Gal.
You couldn't be playing Waterford. I know it's a cliche. You couldn't play Waterford at the worst time. We said it here a couple of weeks ago, to run the games that they have now. It's draw for me. Draw written all over. I think, look, at the only benefit really, both teams not have to win. Both teams really can't lose. And the grass, the size of the pitch as well will suit Dundalk. Probably more than Waterford, really. But whether or not, it's like Donal says, whether or not we can actually feel the team, like, you know, that's the worrying thing. But it is draw written all over it. I'm going to go 2-2. I picked a lot of 2-2s this year. Yeah, I'll stick with 2-2.
Dean?
Yes, Chris.
I'm
going to say I'm going to go with a score draw. I'll say 1-1. Again, you know, Vinny said in his interview before the game on the stream tonight that he was there was only 10 or 11 players that trained this week. He said there was a couple of players came back, I think, yesterday, but it was too soon for them to play. So it depends what he plays. I mean, look at with Sonny gone, hopefully that'll mean Cleary will go back in at centre back with Boyler. Dummigan would probably move to the right in place of Rivas, and hopefully, as Donal says, hopefully he'll have Leahy starting. The midfield hopefully kind of picks itself, and then going forward, hopefully it picks itself as well. But hopefully Hubin scores another hat-trick. We'll see what I say at half time.
Hat-trick at 1-1.
1-1, yeah. No, I still think it's going to be 1-1, but I hope he scores a hat-trick, Chris. Come on.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm going to say 1-1, and I'm going to go with a goal scorer as well. I think I'm going to go with
up in the game here.
Han the man's going to come off the bench, and we're going to be 1-0 down, and he's going to score. Me man.
I just going to say we're going to 1-0 up and scores an own goal.
So yeah, 1-1, and Han's going to get the goal.
Like that,
yeah. Right. I had 1-1 down here for myself now as well, but
who's
I don't know. Do I change or do I stay with what I had? I had 1-1, but I had like 89th minute own goal for our goal. So I think it's going to be one of those.
Han's going to claim it.
Yeah, there we go. He's closest to it and then claims it. So yeah, look, I had gone for a draw here as well. So Donal, you're on your own there, pal.
Yeah, I'm not really wild about what I picked, but you know,
I nailed it. The last time they played there, I nailed it 3-0. That's just shows you how far we've fallen.
Well, I think in fairness, I think the most important thing is we don't lose ground on them, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think a win, if I'm not mistaken, will move us above them, still with a game in hand. But I just think, as long as we don't lose to them, and with the
If
game,
you could go these next 3 fixtures undefeated, obviously you want to pick up a couple of wins in that, but at least you're not losing ground.
It's actually we play Longford. So Dan was right. We play Longford after this, and then we actually play Sligo.
It's one of the games in hand, isn't it?
I think we play Sligo twice, so there'll be a cup game. There'll be a cup game probably in the middle of that. The quarter final, I'd say, it'll be in the middle of those 2 games. But it looks like we play Sligo twice before we play Finn Harp. So
could be the wrong time to be playing them with their new recruits in now as well. You know, you want to play them when they were poor on form, but that's typical of ours.
Just want to call out something that Dan was talking about. It just hit me there when we were saying, hopefully we don't lose ground on Waterford. Like, the idea that we're going to be going to Waterford and the 4 of us would take a draw. Is that not just absolutely?
That's just 2021 in a nutshell.
Oh my God. Sorry.
Yeah. That's it, though. This is what it's become.
Yeah. Do you remember you were just writing the blogs and you weren't part of this and life was good?
Yeah, and they were
welcome to the sub.
Blogs.
You get dinners for your games and everything.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake.
Sorry.
I never drank until this season started.
Yeah. And you went this whole show for nearly 2 hours as well on the water only.
I thought Dan was going to break out the whiskey at some point because he was having a full-on, we've just lost the draw at a rant.
Well, to keep this under the 2 hour mark, lads, I think we'll wrap it up there. Guys, thanks everybody for all your input tonight. Thanks, Dan, for dropping all your own. Thank you, everybody, for all your comments in. I'm free to do any podcasts or live streaming of bar mitzvahs, of... is this not the time for... Okay, we'll leave it there. Pingu, I'll let you have the final word tonight.
No hand, no fan.